Where is it, Jay? Here it is. Did you look at it? Is it okay?
Grades that you received for this class. So before we go over whether you deserved a higher grade on the exam or not, give me an opportunity to put it into a more final version so that we don't have to waste time interacting on things that are not worth interacting on. You know what I mean? It's just a grade on a test. I read all your mini papers. Kept me up late last night. I won't see you after today, right? This is our last time. So before Dr. Haignere begins, I want to say to all of you and the ones that show up after, so hear the echo, you're a great group. I'll miss you. I'm sure you won't miss me and Beth Myers that much, but this class will stay with you forever. Every time you go near another person, it'll stick with you, and it'll hopefully make you better prepared to make good decisions in your life. And don't be strangers. If you need me for anything, email me. But just to talk, don't email. And so, do you want to move them around, or?
I actually would like people in the back row to move up, if that's possible.
It's very tough for them to do, but they can do it. Okay.
That's not up. Up.
I told them that you have to leave a drop early, so
don't want to be rude.
It's okay.
That's true. They're not rude people for a lot of things.
You guys are on the baseball team?
Yes.
What do you play?
Pitchers and catchers.
Pitchers and catchers? All right. Now let me see the right arm. Let's see.
Where are you going to play?
Charlotte.
No. Maybe you'll win a game for a chance. We have a very good baseball tradition at Temple University. This is a little bit of not a great year. It happens.
It's okay. The Mets are in the hole, too.
Okay. I want to introduce to you Dr. Clara Haignere. She's an associate professor in our department, one of our senior leaders. She's won awards as being an outstanding teacher. That should not influence today's talk at all. But I told you that when I bring someone in, I'm bringing in what I consider to be the best to talk about this particular subject. She has leeway to do anything she chooses. We talked a little bit about it. She'll probably talk a little bit about HIV worldwide, maybe STDs. She runs our global, our international health program in public health. She runs a variety of activities to Costa Rica, and I believe even other places now. You'll probably let
trying. We're working on it.
Trying to move. And she's also been a long-time friend of mine, so I want you to be extra nice and respectful because she's just giving her time at the end of the semester. You know how it is. You don't want to give your time at the end of the semester. And so let's say hello to Dr. Clara Haignere.
Okay, so what is AIDS? I know that you had some sort of a presentation by Dr. Bass on HIV and AIDS. Tell me what you know a little bit. Anything. If you don't, nobody raises their hands, I end up calling on somebody.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have to.
Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome.
That's AIDS stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and HIV.
It's the last. I was going to say it's the last stage of HIV.
AIDS is. Yeah. Okay. But what's the relationship between HIV and AIDS?
HIV first.
Okay. What's HIV stand for?
Human
immunodeficiency virus, right? That's the virus that causes AIDS, okay? Is AIDS a disease that will kill you? Well, actually, that's sort of a trick question. Why is that a trick question?
It's because you die from the diseases or whatever you get from having a low immune system.
Right, okay, so you die from opportunistic diseases that are caused by this syndrome. HIV, AIDS? AIDS is a syndrome. What is a syndrome?
It's like the symptoms come as a group, so they follow a syndrome.
Can you think of another syndrome? Another one you might not think of, but it is called a syndrome, is child abuse syndrome, right? So when children come into the emergency room and they have broken bones and they're bruised and they have burn marks on them, look like cigarette burns, and physicians start to go, wait a minute. Same thing with domestic violence syndrome, right? So there are signs and symptoms that go together to form one problematic health concern. And so AIDS is a syndrome, and people don't die of AIDS, but they die of opportunistic diseases that your immune system can't fight off anymore. The common cold. People can get sick and waste away, lose weight, and so forth, okay? Just want to start out in a common place. Now, so AIDS in the U.S. versus AIDS in the world, what do you know? I know I'm supposed to tell you, right? Pardon?
It's the highest rate
Is in Africa. Okay. And let me show you a little bit of that, and then let's talk why that might be. See if I can get the technology to work here. Okay. So globally, the estimates from 2007 is that there are around 33 million people, and the estimates between 30 and 36 million people who are living with HIV. Do they have AIDS? No. We believe they're HIV positive. Thank you. Okay. So new cases of HIV in 2007 estimated 2.5 million, anywhere between 1.8 and 4.1. And deaths due to AIDS, due to opportunistic diseases caused by AIDS, in 2007 was an estimated 2.1 million. Okay? So when we look at the globe, we're looking at a total of 33 million, approximately, who are living with HIV. And what continent here, what area has the lowest number? You got to get this right.
Antarctica.
No, you didn't. And the answer is not Antarctica, right? Because there's nobody there, right? So you can't count that. Australia, Oceania, right? This area has the lowest number of HIV cases in the world. Only in 2007, only 75,000. Now, there aren't as many people there. But when we look at this, it's Australia area, and then what's next? What's the next highest? Raise your hand if you know. Caribbean, right? Okay. Next, followed by the Middle East and North Africa, right? Didn't we say Africa had the most, right? And that's sort of the overall assumption that, we talk about Africa as this big continent. It's huge. And there are big differences between Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. And Sub-Saharan Africa has the most, with 22.5 million people who are HIV positive. That's almost 70% of the world cases are in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? Why might there be a difference between northern Africa and sub-Saharan Africa in terms of HIV and AIDS?
Possible education.
Meaning they don't know.
Yeah, higher education in the northern part of Africa.
In the far north, maybe, but that's not the reason.
Because you might not be able to account for everybody that has HIV in those areas.
So you think it's undercounted?
Isn't it like a lot more? I mean, isn't Southern Africa more like cities industrialized, and like Northern Africa is more village? And like,
Other way around, actually.
Other way, well, yeah, my bad. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like,
Yeah. Now that's not the reason we think.
Does it have anything to do with religion?
It might. What would it have to do with religion? AIDS and HIV and religion?
Is it the North? Well, it's the Middle East, so they have, what do you call it?
What religion is?
Islamic religion up north. I don't know.
Okay, Muslim,
Yes.
right? And why would that make a difference? You pray to a different God, it makes a difference. He answers and the other one doesn't. What's the difference? I'm being facetious, of course.
Very strict. They're very strict about sexual, activity.
Okay, well, very strict in one regard and not in others. There, you might have more than one wife, but it's all within marriage, right? So sexual customs and expectations and culture are a little bit different in the North and the Middle East than in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. So here's the estimated adult HIV prevalence rates. And let me refresh your memory. Those are all of you public health majors? Yes? No? Okay, no. What's a prevalence rate? Somebody must know this, particularly the two that are in my other class.
Answer.
Come on, guys. I'm going to call on you. Chris, what's prevalence?
Isn't the amount of cases each year? I get confused that it's
Okay.
It's the amount of cases that are known.
Existing cases. Not new, but it's new and old cases together. What's prevalence, okay? And what we see here is what? Compared to the rest of the world, HIV went up slightly and has sort of leveled off. And in sub-Saharan Africa, we saw dramatic increases. It's now coming down a bit, and we'll talk about why that is. But why might... let me go back. Why might sub-Saharan Africa have such an increase and be so much higher than any place else? How is HIV transmitted? Blood? Semen?
Vaginal secretions.
Vaginal fluids, secretions?
Breast milk.
What? Breast milk. Okay. Because of lack of health insurance or health care in this area, you think this might be the reason?
Because isn't it when the woman's pregnant, if she's pregnant here, the doctors give them prescriptions so it can reduce the chances of the child getting HIV, whereas over there, if they don't have the proper medical care, they can't have birth control, so if they have sex and they have children, they're bringing more HIV-infected children.
Okay. Well, that definitely has an effect on the child rates and the death rates, particularly in children, which we're going to talk about in a second. But there are some other customs in sub-Saharan Africa that have been problematic for HIV transmission. Anybody have any idea?
Like myths about if you have sex with a virgin, it'll cure you.
Okay, one of the myths, if you have to get cured, you just have to have sex with a virgin, it'll cure you. Awesome, right? That's a great way to get cured, right? Nah, it doesn't work, right? Something else?
Condom use?
Condom use has been fairly low, not customary, and often not available, particularly early on with this. There's also something about wives. So they have a custom of marrying their brother's widow. So if the brother dies of AIDS and there are, kids to take care of, the custom is that the family steps up and takes care of this family, right? By the brother marrying, taking another wife, his brother's wife, and keeping it all in the family. It also keeps HIV in the family. Okay. The other concern that's been now pointed at is uncircumcised males appear to transmit the virus more readily to women than circumcised males. That may be due in part because they don't have enough water and sanitation to be able to keep the foreskin clean. Because we don't see the same thing in developed countries. We have lots of European countries where men are not circumcised, and we don't see the same association because they have good hygienes. But that's a possible issue as well for this increase. Okay, this is the estimated number of adults and children. These are new cases. And again, you can see that Australia area is the lowest, while in sub-Saharan Africa, again, 70% of the cases, new cases, are coming out of sub-Saharan Africa. And these are deaths. So in sub-Saharan Africa, almost everybody has a family that's lost somebody to HIV and AIDS. And also a tremendous number of orphans.
There's a slide move if you want, right in front of you.
Oh, I can't see it. Oh, you mean I don't have to move back and forth?
No.
That's too high technology for me.
Right there.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I have to look here. Over more than 96% of the new HIV cases every day, 6,800 estimated, are from low and middle income countries. About 1,200 are in children under 15 years of age. That's every day, 1,200. And about 5,800 are adults 15 and older. The majority of these are women. And 40% of them are between 15 and 24. So what we see, let me go back a second. So what this means is the population of Africa, of the people who are most productive, who are working in offices, who are tending the crops, who are planting the crops, who are taking care of kids, are gone. Or sick and dying. And what that means in terms of economics has been tremendous. This is from 1997, and it's from the Ivory Coast, of the impact of HIV on urban households. And you see in the general population, not families with AIDS, that this is their monthly income per capita, about 25,000 French francs. And this is their monthly consumption here. And this is their per capita savings, right? When we look at families who are living with AIDS, somebody in their household is HIV positive, we see that the monthly income is cut more than half. And their consumption is cut almost in half. And they're now in debt. There's no savings. And many of the sub-Saharan African countries are rural, agricultural countries. And we see that the production in the household with AIDS, or with somebody who's died of AIDS, this is Zimbabwe in particular, that we see a reduction in maize or corn of 61%, cotton 47%, vegetables overall 49%, ground nuts, which is a big export crop for these countries, 37%, and owning cattle is down 29%. Percentage of sexually experienced girls is in South Africa who say, I have been forced to have sex, 39%. I'm afraid to say no to sex, 33%. And there are times I don't want to have sex, but I do because my boyfriend insists on it, 55%, more than half. So these are a range of 9 countries, most of them all of them in sub-Saharan Africa. The percentage of the workforce that has been lost due to AIDS compared in 2005 to the estimate in 2020 in selected countries. Now, I will tell you the good news is that the pessimism that this shows is probably not going to be that bad, and I'll show you why. That 2020 will not be this bad because we've made some major changes in what's happening in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. But the productivity and the loss of workforce in many of these countries is, they're losing half the people was the expectation from 2005. And this is the projected 2010. This is from projected in 2000 of the size of primary school age population in selected countries. That kids are less likely to go to primary school. Why would that be associated with HIV and AIDS?
They take care of their families.
Okay, the kids are taking care of their families. They may be a family without an adult, and so they're taking care of each other. Another reason? Anybody? I can't hear you when you go there. They may be infected themselves, absolutely. And a third reason has to do with economics. As the income of families go down, they can't pay for school. And in many of these countries, it's not free. And not only is it not free, or even if it is free, they have to have a uniform and they have to have shoes. And they can't afford those, and so they can't go to school because they don't have a school uniform and they don't have shoes to wear to school. So let me just step back a second. When did when did AIDS first appear? 1981. Okay. That was when we first identified in the U.S. this disease. Something was happening amongst whom? Gay men. It was called the gay plague, right? And we couldn't quite figure it out, right? And eventually they identified HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, and they renamed it AIDS, right? Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. In fact, do you know how long HIV has been around? I don't know if Sarah talked about this. 100 years? Not quite that long. It's been about as old as I am. So. 25. Oh, you're very generous. I love it. we have found a family, an entire family, who died in England in 1951 of a very strange disease that they couldn't identify, a husband, a wife, and a child, who all died of a disease they couldn't identify. But their blood had been saved in a blood bank, and they went back and tested it. And in fact, HIV has been around since the 50s. But it has taken a while for it to actually take hold within different populations. Okay, so now, other question is, where did HIV come from?
I was going to ask you that. Like, there's a rumor / myth of how it started, but I just wanted to get from you.
No, tell me what you think. What are all the myths? What's all the reasons they say?
Well, somewhere I heard that, I'm not sure where it was or what race it was, but someone was having sex with animals.
Yeah, in a monkey in particular, right?
And that's how it got
And that's how it got started. Yeah, that's an interesting, that's a hypothesis, right? Other hypotheses?
The government.
The government developed this, okay? Other hypotheses?
Eating monkey like meat.
Pardon?
After like hunting monkeys and eating the meat.
Eating the meat of monkeys, okay? Another possibility. Other thoughts?
I actually heard that in Africa they used to inject the monkey's blood, the green monkey's blood, and that's how it got started.
Okay.
It's supposed to like increase
Okay.
sexual experience or something.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Another one sometimes in sort of tails off of the government idea is that some mad scientist out there, was working in some lab and developed this virus and decided to test it out on whom? Gays and himself. Gays and, African Americans and so forth, right? And frankly, I don't know. And frankly, nobody actually knows. We do know that there is a similar virus in simian monkeys, okay, that could be transmitted via exposure to the simian monkeys. The problem with the idea that eating monkeys causes AIDS is that in Africa, that would be like saying you get AIDS from chicken in the United States. And, lots of people eat monkeys, wild meat, and we would have seen it over the history, we would have seen it longer. So yeah.
Wouldn't AIDS die if you cook it with high heat, and then if you eat it, it's like virtually powerless?
Good. Very good. HIV actually is a very fragile virus, thank God. You can believe that. HIV is a fragile virus. Why do I say that? How do you kill the virus?
You can't kill the virus, but it can only be transmitted via certain ways, such as semen and blood. And if the blood's out for a long time or something like that, it just dies because it can't survive on its own.
Air kills it. Air kills the virus. It's not an airborne, it's not tuberculosis, right, that you're getting. I mean, we have a cup of coffee here, I assume, right? And if I took a sip, which I will, and if she were HIV positive, would I get HIV? No. Why not? It can't be transmitted that way, right? And the other things that kill it are water, right? Heat. So, it's not a foodborne disease, right? It's not waterborne disease. Can you get it from swimming in swimming pools? I can remember in the 1980s, people would go, you don't want to go to the swimming pool because you might get HIV. Not. Okay, yeah.
Is it true that bleach kills it?
That's the what?
Bleach kills it.
Bleach kills
It'll
it.
kill you, but it'll kill it.
It has to be fairly high concentration of bleach, and so if you're sharing needles, right? You should wash it in bleach. Although I will tell you, it's not 100% that it will kill it because the needle often can keep a very slight amount of blood in it. And it loves blood. It thrives in blood. So it likes vaginal fluids, it likes semen, and it likes blood. Okay? So Those are the ways that it mostly gets transmitted, okay? The other thing is, what about mosquitoes? Can you get it from mosquitoes? No. Why not?
Oh, I don't know.
How do you know? How do we know that you can't get it from mosquitoes?
Because only humans carry the virus.
Say it again.
Only humans carry the virus.
Its immune system, its system won't support it. And so we've tested mosquitoes by giving them, letting them draw off of it, and the virus doesn't get sucked up. Okay? The other way you know for certain that you can't get it through mosquitoes is if you got it through mosquitoes, who would have HIV and AIDS? Who would have been the first people to get HIV and AIDS? And it wouldn't have been gays. Who do they love to bite? Who do mosquitoes love to bite? Targets. They're attracted to heat. Who has the hottest bodies? And it's not famous people. Kids. Children. Have you seen? Children are like, when I had a small son, it was great. He was my mosquito protection because they all bit him, right? He's hot, running around, sweaty. It's cool. They're biting him, not me. It's great. I'm kidding. But we would see cases that would have been in children. And that's how you absolutely know that it's not transmitted that way. Okay. So I want to take a look at, AIDS in Africa today and give you a little bit of a flavor for that, as well as sharing some good news. Can you see these? I don't know if this is. These just photo clips of children. Whoops, adults, if I hit the right one here. In Africa, it was called the wasting disease. People didn't understand that people would be losing weight so fast that they were just wasting away. And of course, other opportunistic diseases are what kill people. Okay, let me show you the next slide. So now I want to show you a clip about Uganda, and this is from 60 Minutes.
As president, George W. Bush did something momentous that few of you may know about. Something so momentous that it's saving millions of lives and generating goodwill for America around the world. Millions of Africans who've been dying of AIDS are now living with AIDS, thanks to the Bush program. The U.S. is providing pills to more than 2 million people with HIV/AIDS, people who could never afford them and who are condemned to die. The medicine not only saves their lives, it permits them to live full lives. We went to Uganda, where AIDS has ravaged the country, killing more than 1 million people. And where Dr. Peter Mugeni, a pioneer against AIDS, told us how grateful he is to Americans for saving his fellow Ugandans.
The story will continue in a moment.
Now we're going to have an ad, right?
Why are we just investing when there's another way? A way to measure success over a lifetime, not a single day. Where you don't chase what's hot, you do what's right. Where clients are also the owners.
30
You
seconds.
don't pay low cost, you pay at cost.
You know, all ads used to be 30 seconds. Now they've gotten increasingly longer.
We call it vanguarding. Vanguarding is a behavior, a philosophy, a call to action. So isn't it time to ask yourself, are you just investing, or are you vanguarding? Request a prospectus with investment objectives, risks, charges, expenses, and other information, including at cost, to read and consider carefully before investing.
We thank sincerely the American people. They are the people who are saving lives. They are the people who can be proud that lives are being saved on this continent.
President Bush created the program in 2004 with the bipartisan backing of Congress. Last year, Congress raised the funding to about $7 billion a year for the next 5 years.
You've called this the greatest aid effort in modern times.
Absolutely. There has never been a rescue mission, a mission of mercy of this magnitude that has produced such magnanimous results.
Let me just pause it a second and tell you that although Bush started this funding, it was tremendously underfunded until last year. And they had made promises to add more, and that didn't come through with the economic crisis, and only last year with the Obama administration did we see a change.
He told us Africans now see America differently.
The impression that people in Africa have of America is that America is no longer the world's policeman. It is now Africa's friend. What an image.
And how about this image? All of these exuberant-looking children, every one of them has HIV or AIDS. They would all be dead or dying if it weren't for America. Now they're alive and thriving. Viola is 13. Her mother died of AIDS, and she was dying from it too, until she began taking those drugs provided by the United States. We met Viola at her home, where she lives with her aunt.
That's a lot of pills to swallow at once.
I take them every day.
And you never forget.
I can't forget.
What would happen if you forgot to take your pills?
2 weeks earlier. What would that cost to give him the drugs, other patients the drugs that they need?
$600 per month.
And a man like this, how much would he make a month?
Maybe $5, $10 per month.
Even after pooling their resources, his family didn't have the money for treatments. They decided to take him home to die.
But today, generic drugs have made AIDS pills much cheaper. Treating one patient for a year used to cost more than $7,000. Now it's less than $300. As HIV destroys a person's immune system, leading to AIDS, patients need these powerful pills, antiretrovirals they're called, or miracle pills. To stop the virus, most patients have to take 2 to 6 pills a day. Now, with the U.S. paying for the pills, AIDS patients are no longer doomed. Dr. Mugeni can give them all the drugs they need and send them home smiling.
Absolute miracle, because this kind of situation, Lazarus syndrome, people being resurrected from the dead, was inconceivable only 5 years ago.
The Lazarus syndrome.
Yes.
Rising from the dead.
Rising from the dead.
But even with American aid, the battle is far from over. Several sexual customs here make AIDS hard to contain. Polygamy is accepted in much of Uganda, and infidelity is so widespread that the main chain of transmission is someone having sex outside of marriage and transmitting it to their spouse. And then there are the sugar daddies. That's what Ugandans call rich old men with young mistresses, passing it on to a new generation. It is such a problem that there are even billboards discouraging it. For example, would you let this man be with your teenage daughter? So why are you with his? Prostitutes still find plenty of customers in Kampala, even though half of the women are infected. All the AIDS and all the infidelity make AIDS tests essential. 2 million Ugandans are getting AIDS tests this year, paid for by America. They stand in long lines, scrunched up against each other, thousands in one day. Charles B. Akuma and
So what the research has shown on ABC in Uganda. And Uganda is one of the few countries that has really made a concerted effort to take on HIV. There are a number of countries that have not and have been in denial for a long time about it, including South Africa. Is abstinence, be faithful, and use condoms. And when we look at the data, it's the condoms that work. It's hard to be abstinent, and it's hard to be faithful. And if those are the two you're stressing, then HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases come on the rise. I often say that you'll hear that condoms are hard to use. And that's true, right? You got to know how to use them. You got to take them out of the package right. You got to roll them down right. You got to, put them on right. You got to pinch it right. You got to think about all this stuff. You got to take it off right. All of those things are problematic. But with abstinence, you got to carry it with you every day, all the time, 24/7. You can't wait to the heat of the moment and say, "Oh, by the way, dear, I'm abstinent. That's my birth control method. That's what I'm doing." You got to say it right up front. You got to carry it with you. The condom you can carry with you, but in fact, you have to carry abstinence with you, and you have to stay with it. And we know that abstinence fails. Okay? That you will hear that abstinence. How many people have heard that abstinence is the only 100% effective method for preventing birth control? How many people? Raise your hands high. Right? Okay, so that's true as a method. If you're going to call abstinence a birth control method, a contraceptive method, with every other type of contraceptive methods, we look at two kinds of failure rates. What are they? Anybody know? A method failure rate and a user failure rate. Okay, so the pill, it's like 99.9% method failure. It's going to work every time, almost every time, right? You throw the user in there, like remembering to take it, right? Then the failure rate goes up, right? Same thing with condoms. Condom effectiveness, about 99% effective all the time if you use it right. If you don't use it, we have a user failure rate of about 57%. People don't use it. Okay. Abstinence, user failure rate for abstinence, about the same, particularly as you get older. So if you're telling young people don't have sex until marriage, and that's what the ABC is saying, don't have sex until marriage, and once you get married, be faithful and don't have any sexual relations outside of marriage. And it's not easy. And people have to know about condoms, and they shouldn't be just the backup. What does it say when you say, that the fallback position is condoms? What's that say about condoms? They're not important? What does it say about people who use condoms? Right? As versus people who are abstinent and faithful, right? What's it say about those who use condoms? There's a stigma with it, no? Right? And we need to take that stigma away so that people are comfortable using them when they need to use them. And just to show you this is from 92 to 98 in the Ivory Coast, when they introduced condoms and they could see the percentage of consistent condom use. What we see is the rate of new cases in HIV going down amongst, these are female sex workers. So condoms work if you can get people to use them. So questions, comments? Yeah.
I have two questions. What if somebody does take the medicine, say like a child starts taking medicine as soon as like they come out of they're born, and how long do they live?
We actually don't, they've been living so long, we can't tell you. Okay, it's very positive. I mean, we have kids in this country who have been born HIV positive who are now in college, right? And trying to figure out how to tell their partner they're HIV positive and deal with that. That they get married, they want to have kids, how can they do that? And that is actually now possible to do safely and not infect their partner. So it's very positive. There are a few people who have allergic reactions to some of the medications and things like that, or have such irritations or side effects that they can't take them. But that number is fairly low.
And how did that woman, how was she HIV positive and her husband was HIV negative? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But
What would you say? Yeah, she's probably having a relationship with somebody outside of the marriage. Possibility, right? Not, it's not just guys that have hormones, right? Other questions, comments? Yeah.
Like if a HIV positive mother has a child and during like the birthing process the baby doesn't get it, if she were to say like use a breast pump and not directly give her milk to the baby, will it, because HIV can't live outside of a host, will it die off of milk or?
I guess it's possible that if you used this is very hypothetical because in Africa this probably isn't going to happen, but a breast pump and sterilize the breast milk, that you would kill the HIV. You probably also kill a lot of the advantages of using the breast milk to begin with.
Sterilize it, like if it's just like out in like.
Yeah, because it's still in that liquid. You'd have to dry that liquid up altogether. They have to be not liquid at all. It would survive within the milk that you would refrigerate.
Blood is set on a seed or something. You can't get it from that unless.
If it's wet, if you have a blood-to-blood contact with wet blood to wet blood, you can transmit it. Which is why any of you who are working in public health or working as EMTs or something like that, you need to help people who are bleeding, but you need to, use surgical gloves, rubber gloves of some sort. Yeah. These two people seem to be the only one who have a question.
People who are taking the medication, how many times do they still have the symptoms of HIV or AIDS and get sick? And does the HIV turn into AIDS eventually, even if they are taking the medicine?
Yeah, the definition is a tricky thing. Usually it keeps the viral load down for HIV, so therefore they would still have immune system, have T cell counts that would be high enough that they would not be technically have AIDS, which is why the living with HIV is a better measure now that we have antiretrovirals more universally available. And what was the first part of the question?
Do they still get sick?
Do they still get sick?
Probably not to the extent.
No, right, because their immune system is fairly healthy. The viral load's staying down, so the T4 cell counts is staying high enough to fight other opportunistic infections. So yeah. Other questions?
I remember somebody who just had a project on the AIDS project, and they were saying that some people might be immune to HIV. Not immune, but like they can't contract the disease.
Yeah. Did Sarah talk about this at all? Immune is sort of an interesting word. It's that we now understand that for HIV to attach to a T4 cell, there are two receptors that it needs. So it attaches like that, two receptors. And there are a few people for whom their T4 cell doesn't have that second receptor. And so it can't get in. And so those people appear to be, although they're HIV positive, they actually, if you tested for the virus, the viral load, they actually have HIV, but it can't enter their immune system, which is where it multiplies, and so they don't get sick. And there were a few sex trade workers in, I think it was Nigeria, that they were looking at who, was crazy. They couldn't figure out, they knew they were HIV positive, they knew they'd been infected, but they just never got sick. And so this is one. We also have a couple people here, and perhaps Magic Johnson is the one that everybody knows, that in fact may not have that second receptor. So even though he's HIV positive, he's not get sick. I mean, those people sort of win the lottery, right? That's unbelievable. And there are scientists working on how do you, can we make all of our T cells, could we adjust that and give you something where we'd knock out one receptor so that you wouldn't get it? The question is we don't know what else that might do for your T4 cell count. You know, would it also make you more susceptible to, you know, TB or something like that? And so we're not there yet, but there are scientists looking at trying to understand that relationship better.
In this country, what are like what people or what like part of our country is AIDS and HIV highest?
Well, you asked that in two different ways.
Like who are the people who are getting it and passing it along? And then I guess that's two different questions. And then what parts of the country?
Well, it's interesting because last December, I got a telephone call from a student journalist that called me up and said she was doing an article on HIV and that it wasn't a gay disease. And she wanted to interview me about this. And I called her back and I said, I mean, everybody knows it's not a gay disease. Come on, do we need another article about this? And she said, yeah, because when she was going up one of the stairs in Tuttleman, she heard somebody say, you know, December 1st is World AIDS Day. And there were posters and things up, and somebody she passed said, oh, it's just a gay disease, right? And she was like, you know, we need to talk about this. So it's not a gay disease. It is not an African American disease. It is not a Haitian disease, because they were also high initially. And it does not discriminate against anybody. If you're a warm body with those fluids, you're susceptible, right? It only depends on what you do, right? And over the interim, I teach a class in AIDS and Society. Nobody was in this class. Well, a couple years ago, I got an email from somebody who had been in my AIDS and Society class in June or something like that, right? And I emailed her back because the email was sort of strange. Like, I really need to talk to you. I have some questions. I was in your AIDS and Society class. Can you talk to me? And I was like, well, sure. Here's my home number. Who do you call? Or give me your number and I'll call you. So we ended up talking on the phone, and she said, Dr. Haignere, I slept with a guy who's HIV positive, and I'm in a complete panic, and I don't know what to do, right? And how long ago was it? We went through all of the, you know, the window that takes 3 months. You can between the time you're infected until the time you will show up positive on an HIV antiretroviral or viral test, not testing for viral load, but testing for antibodies. And she'd had my class, you know, and I just like, I want to say to you that AIDS is in Africa, and AIDS is in Europe, and AIDS is in the US, and AIDS is in Pennsylvania, and AIDS is in Philadelphia, and AIDS is on Temple's campus. HIV is here, right? And you got to protect what you do. And, you know, we provide anonymous HIV/AIDS testing on Thursday, I think afternoons. If you're concerned, go get tested. If you're in a wonderful relationship with somebody, wait 3 months. You can do all of the outer course you want to do, right? Save the exchange of bodily fluids until after 3 months and you've been tested, right? And I should tell you, there's now discussion in public health about right now you have to actually say, go to a clinic and say, I want an HIV/AIDS test, right? You can't just go to a doctor's office and get, a series of blood tests and assume you've been tested, right? They don't do that. But they're now talking about making HIV test a common test that's done routinely when you get a blood test. Why is that changing? Because we now have antiretroviral. And if you wait too long, you die. If you get it early enough, it's a chronic disease you can deal with. Okay? So I urge you to take care of what you do. And if it can take 3 months for somebody to show up positive on a test. In terms of, can you tell if anybody's HIV positive? Right? No. Right? They have flu symptoms. How many people have had a flu here? Yeah, I mean, you've all had flu, right? You can't tell if anybody's HIV positive. So take care of what you do. Jay.
Since you did YRB and you've been involved with research in this area, has our sexual behaviors amongst college students changed over time? I mean, because of HIV?
What we've seen is an increased use of condoms to about 50%. The last, when you ask the question, last time you had sexual intercourse, did you use a condom? And about 50% say yes. And that's an increase up to the adult level we were at before. Do you know now who's the most, okay, we talked about incidence rates, which are new cases, versus prevalence rates. Do you know what age group now has the highest increasing rate? It's not, the incidence rate is going up at the highest rate. Do you know what group?
It's like 50 and older, right?
50 and older. Right? All of those of you who have parents out there newly divorced, widowed, out dating, they don't know squat about HIV. So you got an aunt, an uncle, a cousin out there, take them aside. Let me tell you about HIV. Give them a condom. Because they think, hey, over 50 can't get pregnant, right? Cool. Yeah. So what we see is an increasing number of incidence rate amongst that age population. So be a health educator to your parents. Take them aside. Maybe they never had that sex talk with you. Have it with them if they're back out there, dating again. You're all laughing. If you do, come back and tell me about it. Okay, come into my office and tell me what your parents. I actually, what?
They don't even want to imagine it.
That their parents and uncles and aunts have sex. I know. Get over it. So. Okay. Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.